On the morning of Friday the 13th September 2024, a silence hung over Leabank Court in Luton, the kind of suburban stillness that usually signals another ordinary day. Yet behind one set of walls, an 18-year-old was putting into motion a plan he had crafted for more than a year, a plan not just to kill, but to be remembered. Hours later, his mother, then two younger siblings, lay dead. Investigators uncovered notes, disguises, and a forged license that revealed his true ambition to massacre children at his former school. The massacre never happened, but the horror inside his home raised one chilling question. How had a teenager, once described as quiet and geeky, transformed into a killer whose hunger for notoriety almost rewrote Britain's darkest history? When blood becomes hatred, the tragedy of British siblings who murdered their own. Welcome to UK Real Crime, where blood ties turn deadly. Tonight, we uncover chilling cases of siblings who crossed the unthinkable line when family became the battlefield and love gave way to murder. Number 1. Taylor Mitten. Under the calm surface of a quiet English town, the murder of Jack Mitten revealed a darkness few could have imagined. One brother accused of killing another, with 36 stab wounds marking the brutality of the act. On September 3, 2025, paramedics were called to Lindham Road in Worthing, West Sussex. They found 25-year-old Jack lying fatally injured inside the home where he had been staying. Despite desperate attempts to resuscitate him, Jack was declared dead at the scene. The wounds on his body told the story of extraordinary violence. His brother, 22-year-old Taylor Mitten, was quickly named as the suspect. Detectives alleged that Taylor had left work that afternoon and traveled directly to confront Jack. The confrontation escalated into shocking savagery. Prosecutors said the number of wounds suggested intent and rage far beyond a spontaneous quarrel. This was not simply a fight gone wrong, it was something darker. Detective Chief Inspector Mark Collymore, leading the inquiry, addressed reporters soon after. A young man has lost his life in the most violent way. His family is left with unimaginable grief. His words reflected both the brutality of the crime and the bewilderment at how two brothers could reach such a devastating end. In the days that followed, Sussex police released Taylor's image and issued a warning to the public not to approach him. For 2 days, his face appeared across news networks and social media platforms. The manhunt ended on September 5th, when Taylor was arrested and charged with murder. His first court appearance came quickly. On September 8th, he stood before Crawley Magistrates Court, dressed in custody clothing, pale and silent. Observers described him as detached, lowering his eyes and speaking only to confirm his name. There were no emotional displays, no apologies, only an unsettling stillness that left witnesses chilled. The magistrate ordered him to remain in custody and passed the case to Lewes Crown Court. For Jack's family, the pain was almost unbearable. They released a statement through police. "We are heartbroken. We ask for privacy as we grieve this unimaginable loss." Their tragedy was doubled. The victim was their son and the accused another. Their home, once ordinary, had become both crime scene and symbol of broken bonds. Experts said the 36 stab wounds suggested obsession and rage far beyond a normal quarrel. During custody, Taylor admitted to shoving an officer during processing. Though minor compared to the charge of murder, it added to the image of a volatile young man under pressure. In Worthing, neighbours expressed disbelief. The community had always been seen as safe, even peaceful. "You never expect something like this on your street," one resident remarked. The murder shattered that sense of safety and raised uncomfortable questions about how hidden tensions can erupt inside even the most ordinary households. Nationally, the case attracted immediate coverage. The combination of family betrayal, shocking violence, and a public manhunt turned the story into a headline across major outlets. On social media, hashtags about domestic violence and family safety trended, while clips of the police press conferences spread rapidly. Jack's death became part of a broader debate about hidden dangers inside homes. The case spread globally, framed as part of rising violence among young men. Inside the courtroom, the human dimension is hard to ignore. Witnesses described Taylor's empty expression during hearings. No tears, no signs of regret. His silence felt heavier than words. It left many wondering what lay beneath that stillness. Guilt, numbness, or something more complex. Detective Chief Inspector Collymore, reflecting after a hearing, summed up what many felt. "We see terrible things in this job. But the idea of one brother taking another's life, it cuts to the core of what it means to be human. The tragedy has left Worthing changed. Community vigils have been held, candles lit in Jack's memory, neighbors gathering to comfort his grieving family. But even in solidarity, the lingering question remains: how could this happen? There are lessons to draw from this case. First, conflict within families should never be dismissed as harmless. Hidden resentments can grow into dangerous outcomes. Second, changes in behavior, especially volatility or signs of obsession, should not be ignored. And third, silence serves no one. Seeking help early can prevent tragedy before it takes root. The story of Taylor and Jack is not only a crime report, it is a reminder of the fragility of family ties and the devastating consequences when anger overwhelms love. Even the strongest bonds can break under strain. When silence replaces dialogue and rage eclipses compassion, tragedy can strike at the very heart of family. Number 2. Marley Bennett-Smith. In the final weeks of October 2024, Bristol was preparing for the onset of winter. But in one quiet home on Cromwell Road, a tragedy unfolded that would soon draw national attention and spark conversations across the UK. 17-year-old Marley Bennett-Smith, a teenager with learning difficulties and a history of social isolation, lived with his older sister Luca and their father. On October 20th, the ordinary setting of their family home became the site of a killing, so shocking that even hardened paramedics said the scene would stay with them forever. That evening, around 6:30 p.m., Marley asked his sister if he could practice a headlock on her. It was something they had done before, an agreement where Luca would tap to signal him to stop, but this time he ignored her attempts to break free. According to his own words later, he had already decided he would not stop. Instead, he tightened his grip and, in a moment of escalating violence, picked up a knife and stabbed Luca repeatedly. The attack left Luca, just 19 years old, fatally wounded. Barely 20 minutes later, Marley called emergency services himself. In a voice described as flat and emotionless, he said, "I stabbed my sister to death. I hated her my whole life, and I just didn't want to ever see her again." His confession stunned dispatchers, setting in motion an investigation that revealed a complex portrait of resentment, isolation, and unaddressed psychological strain. When police arrived, they arrested Marley without resistance. In the days that followed, investigators pieced together the background. The siblings had recently returned from a family holiday in Amsterdam, where a video captured them laughing and joking together. Just days later, one of them was dead and the other was in custody for murder. During questioning, Marley admitted that resentment toward his sister had built up over the years, and recently, he told officers, "I had decided I was not going to stop. I wanted to kill her." This statement, later repeated in court, revealed the premeditated intent that prosecutors argued made the crime all the more chilling. The trial began in March 2025 at Bristol Crown Court. By this time, the press had campaigned to have his anonymity lifted. The judge agreed, citing the public's right to know, amid rising concern about knife crime in Bristol. For the first time, the name Marley Bennett-Smith was reported widely, attached forever to the crime against his sister. In court, Marley appeared thin and withdrawn, his posture slouched, his eyes rarely meeting those around him. Observers described him as almost detached from the proceedings, a teenager physically present but mentally removed. He pleaded guilty to murder, showing no outward reaction as the charge was confirmed. The prosecution detailed the brutality of the killing. Luca was strangled, then stabbed multiple times. The use of the knife, the persistence of the attack, and the explicit admission of intent were all aggravating factors. The judge concluded that the murder was not impulsive but deliberate. He noted Marley's words, "I wanted to kill her," describing them as evidence of undoubted intention. His defense pointed to an isolated upbringing, dyslexia, and heavy gaming as factors that left him detached from reality. His lawyers argued that he lacked the tools to manage growing frustration and resentment toward Luca. They said he expressed genuine remorse after the killing. The judge acknowledged these factors but did not diminish the severity of the crime. On March 10, 2025, Marley was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 10 years and 5 months. He will only be released if authorities later deem him no longer a risk to the public. For Luca's parents, the loss was impossible to comprehend. The judge himself described their situation as beyond even the worst nightmares, grieving for their daughter, while still loving the son who killed her. The family received support from specially trained officers, but their suffering became a symbol of the profound damage caused when violence erupts within the home. Public reaction was immediate. A video from the Amsterdam holiday circulated online, showing Marley and Luca smiling together. The contrast between that image and the reality that followed struck many as unbearably tragic. The case reignited debate about knife crime in Bristol. Internationally, the case was picked up in headlines from Europe to North America. Commentators noted how a teenager, isolated and resentful, could conceal such hostility until it erupted fatally. The story was framed as part of a larger discussion about youth mental health, the risks of untreated resentment, and the lethal potential of knives in domestic settings. The courtroom image of Marley, expressionless, withdrawn, almost childlike, remains etched in public memory. It was a portrait of a boy who became a killer, a reminder that even in families bound by love, hatred can grow unchecked if left unspoken. The killing of Luca Bennett-Smith raises questions no family ever wants to confront. How do resentments fester unnoticed? Could intervention have made a difference? And how fragile are the bonds we trust to protect us? Even within the closest ties, silence can be dangerous. When hidden anger replaces understanding, when family becomes a battlefield instead of a refuge, tragedy may strike at the very core of home. Number 3. Ben Starr. On a late summer evening in August 2024, a family gathering at a motocross event in Wiltshire turned into a tragedy that would leave 2 families broken and a community stunned. What began as a day of sport and celebration ended with one brother dead and the other facing prison for his role in the fatal fight. Ben Starr, 34 at the time, had joined his older brother Lee, 38, at the Foxhill motocross track near Swindon. Both men had been drinking heavily throughout the day. Witnesses described the atmosphere as lively but charged, with alcohol fueling arguments between the brothers. What started as words soon turned into violence. At around 9:15 p.m., an altercation broke out. Onlookers tried to intervene, pulling the brothers apart, but as Lee turned away, Ben delivered a single punch. The blow landed with enough force to send Lee collapsing to the ground. Medical experts would later explain that the punch itself caused bruising to his jaw, but the fatal injury came when his head struck as he fell. Lee was rushed to hospital but died 3 days later. The event was made even more devastating by the fact that their father and children from both families witnessed the confrontation. What was supposed to be a family day out became a defining moment of grief and regret. 6 days after the attack, on August 31st, Ben Starr was charged with grievous bodily harm with intent and appeared in court. He later admitted manslaughter, with prosecutors agreeing it was a drunken fight gone too far. In June 2025, Ben, now 35, appeared at Swindon Crown Court for sentencing. Wearing a suit, he stood pale and subdued, his eyes fixed on the floor. Observers noted that his posture reflected the weight of his remorse. He pleaded for leniency, with his defense team pointing to his lack of previous convictions and his close relationship with Lee. They described how he often sought his brother's advice, arguing that he had never harbored malice toward him. Judge Peter Blair, KC, presiding as the recorder of Bristol, acknowledged the tragedy but determined that prison was unavoidable. He described the case as tragic, noting that alcohol and anger combined to cut short a life. On June 26, Ben Starr was sentenced to 2 years in prison. In the courtroom, the pain of Lee's family was laid bare. His wife, Jay, read a statement that silenced those present. "Lee was cruelly and senselessly taken from me and our children," she said. "I never imagined I would be forced to put into words the unbearable grief that now defines our lives. We had a future full of hope, love, and dreams together. But that future was stolen from us in a horrific moment, and now every single day is a fight just to keep going without him." She described Lee as the best dad, husband, granddad, son, and friend, devoted to those around him. Detective Chief Inspector Phil Walker, who led the investigation, also addressed the public after sentencing. He highlighted the case as a painful example of how one punch can take someone's life. He urged people to recognize the warning signs when drinking, know the signs when things start to take a turn for the worse, spot the danger, and encourage your friends to walk away. The story of Ben and Lee Starr resonated far beyond Wiltshire and Derbyshire. Across the UK, police forces and community organisations used the case to warn about the dangers of alcohol-fueled violence, particularly so-called one-punch deaths. While no changes to national law followed directly, the case became part of wider public safety campaigns urging restraint and awareness in social situations involving alcohol. Social media amplified the family's grief. Clips of Starr's statement were shared thousands of times, accompanied by messages of condolence and anger that such a life could be lost in an instant. Communities across the country reflected on how quickly celebration could turn into catastrophe when tempers flared under the influence of drink. Starr's sentencing was met with mixed feelings. Some sympathized with the image of a man who had never intended to kill, a brother now haunted by what he had done. Others questioned whether 2 years in prison was enough for a life lost, even one taken in a moment of drunken rage. In court, however, the judge made clear that nothing could bring Lee back, and no sentence would heal the scars left behind. The courtroom portrait of Ben was one of remorse and resignation. He was not the image of a hardened criminal, but of a man broken by his own actions, burdened by the knowledge that his choices ended the life of someone he loved. The case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. How often do we dismiss the dangers of drinking too much? How quickly can anger escalate into irreversible tragedy? And how can families protect themselves when conflict threatens to boil over? In the end, this was not just about one punch. It was about a life cut short, a family devastated, and a lesson painfully learned. Even ordinary arguments can turn deadly when fueled by alcohol. When words become fists and restraint gives way to rage, the line between family and tragedy disappears in an instant. Number 4. Nicholas Prosper. On the morning of Friday the 13th, September 2024, the quiet of Lee Bank Court in Luton was shattered by an act so brutal that it forced the country to revisit its darkest memories of mass violence. In a single hour, 18-year-old Nicholas Prosper destroyed his own family and came dangerously close to carrying out a massacre that could have echoed Dunblane. Prosper had planned the killings for more than a year. Investigators later uncovered a chilling level of premeditation, reconnaissance of his former school, forged documents for purchasing a firearm, and journals describing his ambition to become the world's most famous school shooter of the 21st century. He cultivated an image, even curating clothes he intended to wear during the attack. Black and yellow garments, a bucket hat, and shoes with yellow soles designed for recognition. He chose Friday the 13th for its symbolism, telling himself it was a date not yet claimed by another atrocity. In the early hours of that September morning, Prosper armed himself with a double-barreled shotgun and a knife. His plan was to murder his mother and siblings while they slept, then drive to his former school to massacre dozens of children. But when his mother, Juliana, awoke earlier than expected, the plan unraveled. A desperate struggle followed. Juliana sustained defensive wounds from his knife before he shot her in the head. His 13-year-old sister, Giselle, awakened by the commotion, fled, only to be hunted down and shot in the face. 16-year-old Kyle tried to resist but was shot, stabbed more than 100 times, and finally executed with a gunshot to the head, his pleas for mercy ignored. Prosper left a copy of the novel How to Kill Your Family on Juliana's body, an act prosecutors said was designed for notoriety. He fled the flat minutes later, discarding his shotgun and cartridges in nearby bushes. CCTV footage captured his movements as he wandered aimlessly, the massacre at the school abandoned. By 8 a.m., police officers noticed his suspicious behavior and placed him under arrest. The investigation uncovered not only the weapons but also his extensive planning. Prosper had researched how to kill with a shotgun, watched extreme pornography hours before the killings, and scoured online content about infamous murders. He told a nurse after his arrest, "I wish I had killed more." Prosecutors revealed he had intended to sexually assault his sister as part of the atrocity. Though this plan was not carried out, his chilling lack of empathy became a defining feature of the case. At his first court appearance, his father, Ray, shouted from the public gallery, "I still love you, son. It's not your fault. Okay?" But later, in a victim impact statement, Ray expressed the devastating reality: the pain of our loss will never be healed. This includes my whole family. Our lives will never be the same. He spoke of losing not only his daughter and son, but Nicholas too, a son who had become a killer. On February 24, 2025, Prosper pleaded guilty at Luton Crown Court to 3 counts of murder, firearm offences, and possession of a knife. On March 19th, Justice Chima Grubb sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 49 years. She described the murders as heartless and brutal and emphasized his selfish desire for notoriety. The judge considered but declined to impose a whole life order, citing his age, just 18 at the time of the murders, and his guilty plea. The court heard haunting tributes to the victims. Juliana was remembered as a strong, loving mother. Kyle as a kind teenager with a love for football and boxing, Giselle as a bright young girl with an infectious smile. Their deaths stripped a family of its core and left a community reeling. The sentencing sparked debate across the UK. Some argued that a 49-year minimum was itself severe for someone barely an adult. Others questioned why a killer who had executed his family and planned a school shooting was not handed a whole life term. An appeal claimed his sentence was too lenient, but judges upheld the 49-year term. The wider impact of the case was profound. The case pushed officials to call for tighter school security and new laws on mass killing plots. For many, Prosper represented a new kind of threat, the lone wolf attacker without ideology, motivated purely by infamy. In court, Prosper often refused to attend hearings, forcing judges to order his presence. When he did appear, he showed little expression, his demeanor cold and distant. Forensic psychiatrists described him as lacking empathy or remorse, traits that shaped his decision to carry out the killings. His silence, coupled with his admissions to police, painted a picture of a young man driven not by hatred of his family, but by a hunger for recognition at any cost. Internationally, the case reverberated. Headlines in Europe and the United States compared the tragedy to school shootings abroad, warning that Britain could no longer consider itself immune. Commentators described it as a near miss for the country, prevented only because Prosper's plan collapsed at home. The murders of Juliana, Kyle, and Giselle Prosper reveal how far a desire for notoriety can corrupt, turning a teenager into a calculated killer. They show the fragility of safety even within family walls, and highlight the dangers of untreated obsession and isolation. When recognition matters more than human life, compassion dies in the pursuit of infamy. And when family becomes the first target, the world is left asking how darkness grew unnoticed until it was too late. Number 5. Connor Gibson. On a November evening in 2021, two siblings met under the cover of night in Hamilton, South Lanarkshire. By morning, one of them would never return home, and the other would be at the centre of one of Scotland's most disturbing family murders. Connor Gibson, just 18 at the time, had grown up with his sister Amber in a turbulent environment of foster care and children's homes. Their lives had been marked by instability, neglect, and trauma. Amber, though only 16, carried her own scars. She had been raped 5 months before her death. Despite these struggles, she projected resilience, even sharing a selfie on Snapchat on the very night she died, smiling beside her brother and expressing excitement at seeing him. Hours later, Connor launched a brutal assault on Amber in the woodland of Cadzow Glen. He beat her, breaking her nose, stripped her of clothing and sexually assaulted her with intent to rape. Finally, he strangled her with his hands until her body went limp. The cause of death later confirmed as compression of the neck. Her body was discovered 2 days later, partially hidden, mud-caked, and bearing the signs of shocking violence. Connor's actions did not end there. In an attempt to cover his tracks, he disposed of blood-stained clothing and even phoned Amber's children's home, pretending she was still alive. Investigators later uncovered his online search history that same day, including the phrase, "How to get nosy police officers to stop monitoring your phone." It was a window into a mind already scheming to evade justice. Police Scotland mounted a detailed investigation. Forensic evidence tied Connor to the crime, and prosecutors highlighted the betrayal of trust at its heart. "She would have looked to you for support," the court was told, "and instead you violently assaulted her." A jury at the High Court in Glasgow found him guilty in July 2023 of sexual assault and murder. The sentencing took place in September at the High Court in Livingston. Connor, now 21, appeared pale and withdrawn, his shoulders hunched as the reality of his actions was laid bare. He showed little outward emotion, neither apology nor explanation, as the judge delivered his sentence. Lord Mulholland condemned the crime as truly evil. He noted the aggravating factors: the sexual assault, the attempt to rape, the brutality of the killing, and the fact that the victim was his younger sister. "You took the life of someone who trusted you," he said, "and you did so with cruelty and violence." Connor was sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 22 years before parole could even be considered. The case had another shocking dimension. Stephen Corrigan, a 45-year-old stranger, found Amber's body before it was discovered by police. Instead of reporting it, he touched her body intimately and attempted to conceal it beneath branches. He was later convicted of attempting to defeat the ends of justice and sentenced to 9 years in prison. For Amber's foster parents, Craig and Carol Niven, the loss was unbearable. They recalled welcoming Amber and Connor into their home as children, and Connor's words at the time, "We are safe now." Reflecting in court, Craig said bitterly, "They were, until he took her safety away." The Nivens described Amber as the most giving, loving, supportive, and admirable person. They spoke too of a system that had failed both children, leaving them vulnerable and unsupported. "We now have one daughter buried in Larkhall Cemetery," they said, "and another child in prison." The case struck a chord nationally. Amber's Snapchat post became a haunting symbol of innocence betrayed. Communities debated how a system designed to protect children could allow such tragedy. Child protection and the justice system's ability to intervene in high-risk family situations came under renewed scrutiny. Internationally, it was cited as a reminder of hidden dangers within families. The portrait of Connor Gibson that emerged in court was of a young man damaged by neglect, but also capable of extreme violence. His defense argued that an appalling upbringing shaped his actions. The prosecution countered that no background could excuse the deliberate brutality inflicted on his sister. The murder of Amber Gibson was not just another headline. It was a story of a system stretched thin, a family betrayed, and a community forced to confront how violence can erupt even in the closest bonds. From her death come lessons no one should ignore. Family conflict, however quiet, can mask dangers that must not be dismissed. Early signs of violence or disturbing behavior should be confronted, not excused, and trust, even within families, must be coupled with vigilance when safety is at stake. The story of Connor and Amber reminds us that danger does not always come from strangers. Sometimes, the threat lies within the circle we believe to be safest. Even the closest bonds can fracture under the weight of anger and neglect. When love is replaced by violence, the sanctuary of family turns into its most dangerous place. Blood ties are meant to protect, but tonight's cases reveal how easily they can twist into betrayal, violence, and tragedy. Each story is a haunting reminder that danger doesn't always come from outside. It can strike at the very heart of home. And while the trials end with sentences, the questions they leave behind will never truly be answered. If you found this investigation gripping, make sure to subscribe to UK Real Crime and hit the notification bell, so you'll be the first to uncover the next chilling story. Because in Britain's darkest corners, there are always more truths waiting to be revealed.